Hey guys, well, I couldn't stay away from this. I tried to. I was going to give myself a week or maybe two, but the way that things are progressing so quickly, especially there in the United States, I felt that I wanted to just kind of go over a bunch of information and hopefully get you guys somewhat prepared for what's coming. Um, I think for me, when I run into an issue like this, when there is any kind of crisis, whether it's a natural disaster or it's a disease or a personal illness or whatever it is, I find that the best way to confront it is to understand everything I can about it. And what I don't mean is read the news every day, but what I mean is get the facts. And what we're seeing now, and what you probably are seeing there too, is there's a really big discrepancy between what the mainstream media news is reporting and the actual facts of the disease. And today we're going to point out a few things. I'm not going to go, side by side comparison like I did with the mask video and show you just what the experts are saying and how wrong it is. But I'm just going to give you the facts, and then you can kind of start to distinguish things for yourself. I'm going to give you a resource as well that you can use. This is a really good resource. It's updated very regularly. It may not be the most up-to-date thing because it seems like there are some other sites in particular countries that are reporting on maybe slightly more up-to-date statistics and whatnot, but I use this one because it gives you a really good overview of what's happening around the world, what research is being done around the world, which is important because this thing is spreading and it's progressing so quickly. The knowledge is coming in so fast. So if you'd like to get better prepared, if you want to know about it, then this is the video for you. So the site that we're going to be looking at today, and basically I'm just going to be touring you through this website, and then I'm going to give you the resource. You can read it, you can look through it yourself. There's a lot of good information here. This website I've talked about before. I use it all the time, daily checking it. Is worldometers.info/coronavirus. Worldometers.info/coronavirus. So let's just go through it really quickly, and then we will. I'm going to be also adding some of my own commentary on top of this, and also some opinion. When I give an opinion or maybe a prediction about something, I'll tell you that it's just my personal opinion. But the reason I'm going to give you that input is because I've seen what this disease does in a lot of countries, and I have some thoughts about what might be coming, particularly in America, knowing the American culture and knowing what the media is doing with this disease. And so I kind of want to prep you guys a little bit for what might be coming. Of course, it's my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it's good to be mentally prepared for what might be coming. So let's just go through this. So here we go. The COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak. This is the technical name of the disease. We all call it coronavirus. We can just call it coronavirus. Currently, the cases here, the deaths here, recovered here. We got to keep in mind about these numbers. They're low. They're artificially low. A lot of countries are not reporting accurately, or the numbers are not being released to the general public, or they're not being released to the foreign media. So a lot of governments, what we're seeing is they're trying to insulate. As this is burning through the population, they're becoming panicked, and they don't want to tell people how bad it is. This is happening in countless areas now where they're telling people, oh, it's fine, but in fact the hospitals are filling up. So we got to keep in mind, and this is what I've been saying from the beginning. When we look at this number of deaths, you say, 3,000, 3,300, 4,000, what's that? The flu kills 70,000 a year. Yes, but we're at the second month of this thing, and it's taken out 3,000 people, and this number is artificially low. So just something to keep in mind. Not trying to create panic, just trying to be realistic about it. Here we have the active cases and closed cases. So this was something that I kind of honed in on in a previous video about closed cases. This is an important number to look at because we can see of all the cases that have resolved, what's the percentage of cases that resolved in a good resolution, that were able to be released, that recovered, and what percentage did not, what percentage died. That number has shifted a little bit, the percentage. Before, when I did that previous video, the percentage of death was 9% of people. And those recovered or discharged was 91%. So that's a very, very high death rate. Now, we have to remember that this was looking particularly at China, and now we're getting a more of a accurate picture of globally what the actual death rate is going to be. So it does seem to be coming down. But what likely is going to happen is as hospitals become overrun, that death percentage is going to go back up because they just can't care for everyone. So again, just something to keep in mind. We are not able to say at this point that 6% of the population will die. We're not saying that. But currently, this is the percentage of those who have resolved. So either they recovered or they did not. So just something to keep in mind. These two graphs are important. What we're seeing here, we're going to look, let's look at both of them. We're seeing here for the total cases, this is the confirmed cases. So that's that first number up here, these coronavirus cases. This initial climb here, this was all China. I did a video on this day right here when there was this huge jump in cases. It went up, I think by 10 times as it had the day before. And the reason that it went up so quickly is because Chinese doctors decided to change the way that they diagnosed. So in many countries right now, they will only report an official case if they do the genetic test on the virus and it comes back positive. Then they say, okay, without a doubt, this person has the coronavirus. The problem is that those tests are notably inaccurate. This was a big problem in the US. They were testing people that were saying, no, they're negative, but they had pneumonia. They were very serious cases. They had been to China. And then finally, they came back positive. So doctors in China early on realized that this was not an accurate way to test. You had to look at symptoms. You had to look at the CT scans of the chest, see if it's showing signs of severe pneumonia. If they were fitting all that diagnostic criteria, then they were saying, yes, this is a confirmed case. Now, as soon as they did that in China, the cases spiked way up because they realized there was a ton of people that they had not actually diagnosed. That caused panic, and so the Chinese went back on that. They said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're getting too many cases, so let's say, no, we're only going to do the genetic tests. So again, that number went down artificially because now we're not looking at all the cases. So again, and I was reporting on this day to day basically when this was changing, but it was going up and then down, up and down. And so we have no idea really what the accurate picture of this is in China at the moment, or really anywhere around the world. But that's something to keep in mind, that the Chinese changed their diagnostic criteria on this. But what we're seeing overall with this graph is that the cases were going up, and then around mid-February, early March, they started to kind of peak and level out, which means that there weren't a whole lot of new infected cases coming in, about 200 or 300 a day, which was down from 1,000 a day, and it started leveling off. But in early March, now this thing started to take off in other countries, Japan, Italy, South Korea, Iran, and that's what this is showing. So really this is a very early graph of what's going to be happening with this disease. Same thing with total deaths here. On the orange curve, we see it goes up to about here, February 23rd, February 24th, it starts leveling, and then it starts taking off in other countries. So it's likely, again, we don't want to cause panic, but it's likely that what we're going to see is just exponential increase in deaths and in confirmed cases. There's really no reason to believe it's going to be doing anything different at this point. Okay, so let's go down. And a very important thing that I've stressed in the past about numbers, why you can't really trust the numbers. Let's look at this coronavirus testing. I did a video here maybe about a week ago, maybe less than that, about the CDC testing and numbers that were being reported. And I had raised some concerns about the numbers. So take a look here. South Korea. This is a country with about, I forget the number now, is it 30 million or 50 million people? Anyway, it's low. I think it's 50 million people. They've already done 109,000 tests. They are testing 10,000 people a day. Italy, also a country much smaller than the United States, 23,000 tests have been done. Austria, very small country, 2,000 tests. Switzerland, 1,000 tests. UK, 13,000 tests. And the United States to date has reported 472 tests. Now, we will say that this number is not accurate because the CDC stopped reporting tests. So we don't know how many tests have been performed. It's likely much higher than 472, but that just gives you an idea of scale. The United States is a giant country, over 300 million people, and only a few hundred tests, maybe a few thousand at this point, but still woefully behind other countries. So again, we can't just look at those numbers and say, oh, America is low risk. Okay, let's go back. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with these numbers. I think you can look at them yourself and draw conclusions. Just again, a point to keep in mind is that we cannot draw a whole lot of conclusions from the numbers because we know they're very, very low. Let's take a look at symptoms. This is something very important. Many of you are probably concerned. If you have a cough, you're wondering, oh no, do I have coronavirus? The chances at this point are, I would say, low that you have coronavirus is probably in your community, but that's an opinion. That's a personal opinion. Let's take a look at the actual symptoms of the COVID-19, the coronavirus. The main ones here are fever, cough, and shortness of breath. So what that means is if you have these symptoms, if you have a fever, if you're coughing, got the shortness of breath, be cautious. This is the time, especially, we'd want to have a mask on. This is the time when you want to think about keeping yourself separate from the healthy population, including your family, living in a separate room for a while, using a separate bathroom if you have the ability to do so, disinfecting things thoroughly in the home to limit the spread to family members. What we're seeing in a lot of countries is this thing goes very quickly through a household. One person gets sick, they get the other people sick in the house. So if you have those symptoms, just keep yourself away from everyone else. Maybe it's just a cold, probably it's just a cold, but you don't want to take your chances. Now, typical symptoms here, we can get a little bit more of a scope of what's happening here. Something to keep in mind about these infections is that 80.9% are mild cases, 13% though are severe, and 4% are critical. And it looks like those almost that 4% then resolve in death, including respiratory failure, septic shock, which is when the infection in a body is so high that the organs begin to shut down, the blood pressure goes very low, and then that's what this is saying here, multi-organ failure. So that's very serious for a small percentage of the population. But these are the symptoms you want to look out for. One of the things that was said here, I think it might be in here, yeah, this gives some case studies. Yeah, this is really, really good to see here. In 98.6% of the cases, they experienced a fever, so that's a really high, very common sign. Fatigue in 69% of the cases, dry cough in 59% of the cases. So that fever is going to be a really, ignore this. That fever is going to be a really significant, feature of this. So most people have had, the vast majority of people have had that fever. There are also some other things here that are included. This is really good. This is a really exhaustive list of symptoms and the number of people and the percentage of people that showed these symptoms according to a study done in China, which was looking at tens of thousands of cases. So good things to educate yourself on. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can look at it yourself. Something that's really important to look at, let's get out of this, we're going to look at the age, sex, and existing conditions of deaths. This is really important information to know. Let's take a look down here. So by age, this is what we're seeing. So this is something very important to keep in mind. When one of the problems I have with the way the media is covering this is they keep saying, treat it like a flu. The problem is that the flu affects a very different part of the population. Typically, you see small children being especially affected by the flu, developing coughs, possibly having complications from that, pneumonia, and even smaller infants and whatnot. And then it affects also the older population. What we're seeing with this COVID-19 is it's a little bit different. So let's look at the facts now about this disease. So of the data that we have now, which is now including tens of thousands of patients, age 80 years and up are particularly susceptible to this disease and the complications that it can cause, the things that we looked at in just a little bit ago. Pneumonia, septic shock, organ failure, those types of things. They are particularly susceptible. Here we see a death rate, overall death rate of 14.8%. So 14.8% of those individuals in that high-risk group died from this. When you go down to 70 to 79 years old, that goes to about half, 8%, which is still very high, and then it just kind of halves with each decade. So 60 years and up, 3.6, 50 years and up, 1.3. And then when you get down to 10 years old or small children, 0 to 9 years old, you're seeing that it's very, very low. And then here in this category, it's saying no fatalities at all. Now I will say, personally, this is an opinion. Personally, I would say to exercise a little bit of caution with this. And the reason I say that is because we have to remember that most of the data so far compiled about deaths has come from China. And China has a really, it has a reason to underreport young cases with this. Because if China had said that even one child had died from this, it would have caused mass hysteria and panic here. That's an opinion. It doesn't mean that there was a cover-up here or that there were young deaths. but I just find it a little hard to believe that in that large of a spectrum of studies that you didn't have any deaths in that category. So we're going to have to see as this thing spreads around the world if that's accurate or not. But it does look like it fits the data. I'll say that. It fits the data. So 80 years and up, high. 79 years and up, also high, and then it decreases. So again, if you're in your 30s, if you're in your 40s, if you're generally healthy, you don't have to worry too much about this thing. But what you do have to worry about is spreading it to others, and also the complications and hospital stay and bills and whatnot. So definitely something to take seriously. Next, looking at sex, I don't think this is incredibly important because this is again coming from China. The males are experiencing a higher death rate than the females, but here in China, 62% of males smoke as opposed to 3% of females smoking. We know that smoking puts you at a higher risk of pneumonia, catching pneumonia. It's about 3 times higher. So to me, looking at this, this is all Chinese data. We have to see what it does to the general population. It may be just 50%. Men and women are at equal, at equal risk for this COVID-19 and the complications. Something very important, and this really stands out to me thinking about America, thinking about the kind of pre-existing medical conditions that so many people have in America. This is what really scares me, is that just what it says here, the probability of death depends on pre-existing conditions. So cardiovascular disease, if you've got that, you are at higher risk for now experiencing severe effects of the COVID-19. That death rate goes up quite a bit. Diabetes, also, you're at higher risk. Chronic respiratory disease, also higher risk. Hypertension, cancer, all of these things will put you at higher risk. So knowing this data, what does this tell us? Well, we said the first thing, 80 years and up, high risk. Pre-existing conditions, high risk. Now, think about what that means is nursing homes are going to be high risk. These are people that probably have had cancer. They may have diabetes. They may have cardiovascular disease. There are older people all living in small confines. They're eating together, usually at tables together. They're using possibly public bathrooms together. They are going to be at increased risk for this. So this is an opinion, personal advice. If you have a family member that is being cared for in a home like this, extreme caution is required when you go visit them. Washing your hands, possibly, just a personal opinion, possibly changing your clothes when you get there, or maybe at least a jacket so that you're not bringing in that virus into that hopefully sterile environment. Again, knowing the facts, knowing what we do about this disease, we can see immediately, okay, this is going to be high risk. Now, this also sheds a bit of light onto the cruise ship situations. Now, the Princess Cruises, did a little research on that. The average age of a Princess Cruise passenger is 35 to 65 years old. So that's on the upper end of that risk spectrum. And we know that they're quarantining people on a ship. It's happening now in California where they take all the sick people and the healthy people, they put them together on a ship, and that disease just circulates. So prediction, personal opinion, I think that thing happening in California is going to be a disaster. We saw it in Japan, in Yokohama with the Diamond Princess, and now seeing it again, putting those people together. They really need to get people off the ship, separate the sick from the healthy, quarantine them, and then that's the way you keep them safe. So history repeats itself. That's just the way it is. Okay, let's go to look at something else here. Incubation period. This is interesting as well. One of the reasons, again, that people are so concerned about this is the fact that the incubation period is so long. If we go down here, we can see a comparison between COVID-19 and other diseases. So what we believe about the coronavirus so far is that you have this 2 to 14 day period of incubation. So I touch a surface that has the disease on it, perhaps a doorknob. I then touch my mouth, or I eat something. I eat a French fry, or I touch a straw, and I drink it. The disease, or the virus rather, it goes into my body and it begins incubating. Within 24 hours, I could be spreading that, shedding that virus and giving it to other people, but I'm not showing symptoms. No cough, no fever, no shortness of breath. It could be up to 2 weeks when suddenly I cough. I've got a fever, and then maybe another week before I test. So we're looking at 3 weeks possibly from infection to knowing that you have, confirming that you have this virus. And then what do you have to do? You have to go back those 3 weeks and figure out all the people that you talked to, all the people that you touched, everyone that you had contact with, and then tell them, you might be at risk, you might be at risk, you might be at risk. That's what China experienced early on, and that's why they shut everything down. They isolated everyone because it takes so long to know if you're showing symptoms, and then even longer to know if you've got it, that the best thing is just to isolate everyone. And it seems to be working. I don't think that's going to work for the United States, but just an explanation on why China has done that. If you compare COVID-19 with the other diseases that have come out recently, the really scary ones, for example, SARS, that was a big thing back in 2003, we see it had a shorter incubation time of 2 to 7 days, so half that time as COVID. MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, also much less, 5 days. Swine flu, even less than that, 1 to 4 days, and sometimes a very quick onset of symptoms. And then seasonal flu, 2 days. So this is why, again, this thing is quite a bit scarier than just the seasonal flu. You can't compare it because the seasonal flu, you get it, and within a few days, you're showing symptoms. Novel coronavirus is different. COVID-19, 2 weeks. Okay, going back to this site now, these are all the numbers coming out of the countries. You can see this is spreading quite quickly. The total number of countries here, oh, here it is. So here, total number of countries, 89 countries and territories. So this is just another thing to keep in mind, is that there's been quite a bit of criticism towards the WHO by independent epidemiologists, people that study epidemics, people that study diseases, virologists, telling the WHO, you need to declare a pandemic, you need to declare a pandemic, you should have declared a pandemic a week ago, you should have done it 2 weeks ago. Why? Why does that matter so much? Well, because when the WHO declares a pandemic, it allows governments access to funds used to make preparations and begin treating people and, just preparing the public for this thing. Without it making that declaration, these governments are kind of tied. They can make preparations at the local levels. That's what you're seeing in California. The local governments, the state governments are starting to do things. But again, without getting that official declaration, okay, this is a pandemic, we're going to go to the next phase, it makes it more difficult. So just something to keep in mind, that this is now, by many experts' estimations, this is a global pandemic. Another thing to keep in mind, I think the last thing we're going to look at for today is, here's another thing. Talked about the WHO just now. Here's what the WHO, Dr. Tedros, saying about this thing. He's saying, we're concerned in some countries the level of political commitment and the actions that demonstrate that commitment don't match the level of threat we all face. So high threat, low commitment. This is, in caps, not a drill. Not the time to give up, not a time for excuses. This is a time for pulling out all the stops. They are concerned. WHO is very, very concerned with this, and I think we should all be as well. Okay, so the last thing that I really like, we're going to look at 2 more things, sorry. The next thing I like about this particular site is that when you are trying to follow the news on this COVID, it's going to be coming out so fast. There's going to be so much info coming at you from all these different headlines, and they add a lot of fluff. Either they're creating extra panic, they're interviewing people that don't really know anything about the disease. And I'm not saying doctors don't know anything, but sometimes they interview someone like on the street, They do this thing where it's like, oh, there's a case in your community. How do you feel? Who cares? We don't need to know what that person feels. We need to know the facts. And this website gives you the facts. So what you can see is day to day where those cases are coming from and gives you a link to the news article. So for example, here we see March 6th, that's today, 5 new cases in the United States, first 2 cases in Colorado. It gives you a source here. You can click that, go right to the news article. 3 cases in Maryland. These had recently traveled overseas. 8 new cases in Canada, and so forth. So we're getting that absolute essential information that we need. And for a disease of this magnitude, for a pandemic of this scale, the news is going to be coming out so fast that this kind of resource is what you need, because it's going to give you exactly, just the facts. This one, this one, this one. Look at that link, and you're done with it. You don't need to hear this person talking about it. You don't need to hear this person talking about it. You can get that information right away. Okay, so that's another facet of this website I want to share, and I think that this is just a fantastic resource. The last thing we're going to look at This is the thing that scares me. And again, don't want to create panic over this, but do want to be prepared, is the death rate. We've heard a lot of different things about the death rate, and I've been particularly concerned with what is being reported on the U.S. media, because it's all over the place, and it shouldn't be, because we have the information already. But I was watching a interview yesterday, I think it was on CBS or NBC, with a doctor that was saying, we don't have to worry too much because the death rate is around 0.2%. That's not even close to what the current death rate is estimated at being. If you look here, this is from the WHO. They're saying that globally, about 3.4% of reported COVID-19 cases have died. That's pretty high, 3.4%. There are epidemiologists saying now that with the spread of this disease and with the difficulty of containment that COVID-19 is presenting, it's very likely that this is just going to be everywhere. It's going to be something that most of the population gets, 70%. Well, if you do that math, if 70% of the population gets it, and then 3.4% of that population dies from it, that's a lot of people. That is a significant number of people. So we do not want to treat this as the flu. This is not a cold. This is not the flu. This is dangerous. You'll be okay if you get it, but it's going to create problems in hospitals. What we're seeing with a lot of hospitals, this is again an opinion, this is my personal prediction of what you're going to see there in the US, is in a lot of areas that delayed testing. They started having a case here, a case there, a case here, people showing up, getting hospitalized, getting other people sick, and then you have clusters of cases. The people go to the hospitals become overwhelmed, they don't have enough ICU units, they don't have enough respirators to treat people, and then you just start seeing deaths. You start seeing overwhelmed medical professionals, doctors and nurses that now are having breakdowns because they can't handle the number of cases coming in. I know that sounds very scary, but I think it's good to kind of prepare mentally for this could be what you start seeing. It's not that at this point you're going to have 1 or 2 cases. We've already seen that. It's going to be a dozen cases. It's going to be 50 cases here, and then maybe a handful of deaths, and then a dozen deaths. And it's going to come at you so quickly. That news is going to come at you so quickly, and there's going to be so much media. Both things. You're going to have hype. You're going to have guys saying, "Oh my goodness, this is the end of the world," and you're going to have people saying, "Don't worry, it's going to be over in a couple weeks." You're going to have both, and it's going to be so confusing. So, my recommendation, again, opinion, is to use sources like this. Look at a source that just gives you the facts, and then you know, okay, we've got 2 more confirmed cases in our backyard. Okay, now we have to be extra cautious when we go out. Wash our hands even more. Wash our clothes even more. Okay, if we have masks, wear them when we're in public. Social distancing. We're absolutely not going to shake hands with people. We're absolutely not going to touch certain surfaces. If I touch even a handle on a supermarket, when I go in, I'm washing my hands. I got a wipe, I'm washing my hands. Something to keep in mind too, I hear that the antibacterials and sanitizers, all that stuff is getting sold out. Any alcohol that is ethanol alcohol over 70%, I believe 70% alcohol is effective. Anything below that, not effective. So you can do some more research on that about making possibly your own sanitizers, but there are things that you can do in the home if you don't have sanitizing wipes. There are things that you can do. Just be careful, make sure you're doing the research first, but things that you can do, DIY at home if you want to have those wipes on hand. Same with masks. There are things that you can do at home if you can't get a mask. Again, me personally, I am recommending the use of masks, but if you want to know how to do a mask, there's resources there online. This is just something that you don't want to take. You don't want to take a chance with. If you get sick and you get other people sick, it scales very quickly. So anyway, this is the information I want to share with you today. Look at this site. Try to go over it. Get your mind around what might be coming. Prepare mentally for that, and hopefully this thing does finish quickly. But it's anyone's guess at this point. All right, that's it. See you next time.